The tide was receding when we reached the entrance to Merlin's cave. Imagine descending a narrow-cut path into the cliff face. The wind sharp against your skin, the sound of waves all around you. The cave mouth opens at the base of Tintagel's headland, and the path leads straight through the rock from one side of the peninsula to the other. At high tide, the cave fills with seawater and you can't enter. But twice a day, when the tide pulls back, you can walk into the darkness on wet stone, surrounded by the echo of dripping water. We entered the cave in the late afternoon. The light was softening toward dusk. The cave swallowed us gradually. First, there was the bright Cornish sky behind us, and then the gray half-light of the entrance. And as we walked deeper, the dark. The ceiling arched overhead, and the walls glistened with moisture. Our footsteps echoed. Our voices dropped to whispers. I've brought pilgrims into this cave many times. We come here to drum. The acoustics are extraordinary. Sound reverberates off the curved stone walls, building and layering until you feel surrounded by rhythm. But what happened on this particular afternoon was something that we hadn't planned. We settled into position about halfway through the passage, where the light from both entrances balances in a kind of twilight. I began the drum rhythm. Steady, grounding, the heartbeat pace that opens inner doorways. The pilgrims joined with their own drums, their rattles, their voices. And then the birds came. A small flock of rock doves had been nesting in the cave's upper reaches. As our drumming grew, they began to circle us. Their wing beats fell into the rhythm. Their calls wove through the sound we were making. For 10 minutes, maybe longer, we drummed together. Humans and birds. In a cave between worlds. Making music that none of us had planned. No one spoke afterward. We walked out of the cave in silence. You're listening to the Holy Rebels podcast, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Mystics. I'm Nina Hirlaender, Franciscan sister, spiritual director, and founder of Dancing Spirit Tours. If you're a spiritual seeker or a mystic in the making, you're in the right place. Let's get started. This is episode 7 of the Soul's 8 Thresholds of Transformation. We're walking through the 8 traditional points on the Celtic Wheel of the Year. These are psycho-spiritual turning points within you that mimic the seasons of change that we see in nature. The Celtic Wheel recognizes that the soul moves through cycles. The Celts didn't separate their practical lives from their spiritual lives. Planting and praying were part of the same rhythm. They observed the land and learned from it. Each point on the Wheel of the Year has its own wisdom to offer. The first threshold, Imbolc, invites you to sense what new chapter might be forming beneath the surface of your current life. The second threshold, the spring equinox, requires the courage to decide and move toward your goal. The third threshold, Beltane, reclaims desire and embodied joy as sacred fuel. The fourth threshold, the summer solstice, invites you into full radiance while learning that genuine strength includes receiving support. The fifth threshold, Lammas, teaches you to receive with grace. The sixth threshold, the autumn equinox, practices the mature art of release, letting go of identities that have expired without losing the real self underneath. And now we arrive at the seventh threshold, Samhain, the threshold of shadow. This threshold occupies a different register than the ones before, because the first six move through cycles of building, choosing, expressing, receiving, and releasing. Samhain asks you to stop moving forward and start to look at your inner life. Meet the parts of you, your history, your grief, your unfinished stories, the parts of you that you've ignored or preferred to leave in the dark. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that wants our love." This is the invitation of Samhain. The shadow is not your enemy. It's the neglected territory of your own soul, asking finally to be acknowledged. If old memories have been resurfacing lately, if you've been feeling reflective and inward, if grief or tenderness rise more easily than usual, or if you're drawn towards silence and a sense that this chapter in your life is ending, then you are standing at the Samhain threshold. By the end of this episode, you'll understand what Samhain is asking of you. You'll have entered Merlin's cave with me and discovered a practice for meeting shadow with compassion instead of avoidance or drama. Let's describe what this threshold looks like in nature. Samhain falls on October 31st, the midpoint between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. In the Celtic calendar, this was the beginning of the new year, not January 1st with its champagne and resolutions, but the darkest time, when the fields have been harvested, the last fruits have been gathered, and now there's nothing to do but wait. The land is completing its year. Above ground, everything looks barren. But beneath the surface, the dark soil is doing essential work, breaking down what has died, transforming decay into nutrients, preparing the ground for what will eventually grow. The darkness isn't empty. It's generative. It's where the new cycle begins. The ancient Celts understood Samhain as a threshold between worlds. They believed the veil between the living and the dead grew thin at this time and allowed for communication across the boundary. Ancestors could visit. The unseen could make itself known. What had been hidden could finally be seen. On the spiritual level, Samhain is when you're invited to face what you've been avoiding. The unfinished conversations, the grief you've deferred, the parts of yourself you've exiled, the stories you told yourself that aren't quite true. The Jungian analyst Robert Johnson wrote that the shadow is that which has not entered adequately into your consciousness. So the shadow includes everything you've rejected, denied, or failed to develop. Not only your weaknesses, but also your unlived strengths, your unexpressed creativity, your unacknowledged desires. What you refuse to face doesn't disappear. It waits. And Samhain says, the waiting is over. What you've avoided is ready to be met. So there are some signs that you know you're standing at the Samhain threshold. Perhaps old memories resurface without invitation. You'll be doing something ordinary like washing dishes or driving to work, and suddenly you're remembering a conversation from 15 years ago, or a choice you made. And the memories feel vivid and present and unfinished. Perhaps you feel reflective and inward. The social energy that carried you through other seasons has quieted, and you don't want to produce or perform. You want to just sit with what's already happened and let it settle into meaning. Or maybe you're drawn to silence. Noise that used to feel neutral now feels intrusive. You need more space between your interactions. Maybe you crave solitude, not from depression or something, but from a genuine need to hear yourself think. And you sense that a chapter is truly ending. Now, it's different from the release of the autumn equinox threshold, which was about consciously choosing what to let go. Samhain is about acknowledging what has already ended, whether or not you chose it. Something in your life has closed, and you're standing in the pause before whatever comes next. These are signs that your soul is asking for Samhain energy, asking you to descend into the territory you've been avoiding and discover that it can be met with compassion. Now, there are two ways that I typically see people get stuck and struggle at this threshold. The first way is avoiding shadow instead of meeting it. This shows up as constant activity, endless distraction, the reflexive reach for your phone whenever a difficult feeling arises. Our culture offers infinite ways to bypass what's uncomfortable. Streaming services, social media, productivity as virtuous, even spiritual practices used as escape rather than engagement. The philosopher Blaise Pascal observed in the 17th century that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit in a quiet room alone. Well, if only Pascal could see us now, he would be horrified. The inability to sit quietly has only intensified. We've built entire industries around helping people avoid the inner confrontation that Samhain requires. And what happens when you avoid shadow? It doesn't go away. The grief you don't process becomes like a low-grade heaviness that you carry everywhere. The truth you don't face becomes the distortion in every relationship. The parts of yourself you exile become the saboteurs of your own happiness. Shadow avoided doesn't dissolve. It accumulates. The second way I see people get stuck here is that they isolate themselves, descending into darkness and staying there, mistaking depression for depth, or using introspection as another form of self-abandonment. Healthy shadow work is relational. It happens in the context of support, whether that's a trusted friend or a therapist, a spiritual director, or a community that can witness you without trying to fix you. The descent is meant to be temporary. It's a passage rather than a destination. You go down to retrieve something, like Prometheus, and then you return. The gift waiting for you on the other side of this threshold is reconciliation with your past, which makes you truly ready for a new beginning. Now, let me take you into Merlin's cave. The cave sits at the base of Tintagel Castle on the rugged north coast of Cornwall. Legend connects this cave to King Arthur. Some say Merlin brought the little child Arthur to this cave because it's a place of prophecy and magic. The historical truth is simpler and perhaps more powerful. This is a sea cave, carved by tide over millennia, and humans have been entering into wonder here for as long as humans have lived on this coast. We time our visit carefully because the tide charts dictate when we can enter. There's a window of a few hours when the cave floor is passable before the ocean comes and reclaims it. We descend the steep path from the headland, the wind whipping our clothes, the sound of waves growing louder as we approach. And the entrance is massive. A dark archway, maybe 40 feet high at its peak, framing a view of wet sand and glistening rock. You step away from daylight and into twilight as you enter the cave. The temperature drops. The acoustics change. Sound behaves differently here. Your voice returns to you altered, surrounded, multiplied. We walk deeper. The passage narrows slightly and then opens again. At high tide, you'd be underwater standing here. But now, in the precious window between tides, you're walking where the ocean was and will be again. And there's something humbling about that. You're a guest in a space that doesn't belong to you, that will erase all evidence of your presence within hours. About halfway through, where the light from both entrances creates a balanced kind of twilight, we stop. This is where we drum. I explain the practice to pilgrims, how the steady heartbeat rhythm of the drum helps quiet the thinking mind and opens access to deeper knowing. How the cave's acoustics will do something to the sound that you can't predict. How the only instruction is to stay present with whatever arises and allow yourself to express whatever sound wants to come out. I begin the drum. The rhythm is simple, ancient, grounding. Others join. One drum, then another. A rattle finds the space between beats. The sound builds. It bounces off the curved stone walls, layers on itself. You feel it in your chest, in your stomach, in your teeth. The cave amplifies everything. Takes what we offer and returns it magnified, surrounding us with its own prayers. And then, on this particular afternoon, the birds. I've been in this cave maybe 50 times. I've never experienced what happened that day. The swallows and rock doves that nest in the upper reaches of the caves didn't flee from our sound. They joined in. They began circling overhead, their wing beats falling into perfect synchronization with our rhythm, their calls weaving through the drumming like a wild descant none of us could have composed. We made sacred music together. Humans and birds, in a cave between worlds, on the threshold of Samhain. The ritual takes on a life of its own. Sure, I begin it with a drum, but when the pilgrims join, and then the birds, and we allow ourselves to listen, we become like one organism making sound. You can't distinguish anymore who is leading and who is following. The boundaries dissolve. Voices merge. Someone begins to tone, a long, low note that finds harmony with the drums. Others join. Movement starts. A woman sways, then another. Someone's feet begin to shuffle on the wet stone. There's no choreography, no self-consciousness. The sound moves through bodies and the bodies respond. Jaws unclench. Spines undulate. It's cathartic, primal, the kind of magic that doesn't ask permission. The rhythm vibrates through muscle and bone and shakes loose what's been locked there. Stress, grief, years of holding, it leaves through shaking, sounding, moving, surrendering to the pulse. The energy rises. It builds and builds. The drums faster now. The voices higher. The birds still circling. The cave itself seems to breathe with us. Your skin prickles. The sound fills every corner of the space and every corner of your body until there's no difference between inside and outside. Then, without anyone deciding, it peaks in one suspended moment where everything, sound and vibration and aliveness are present. And then it begins to soften. The drums slow, the voices quiet, the birds settle. The rhythm descends organically, finding its own resolution. No one conducts the ending. It simply arrives and everyone knows it, the way a wave finally reaches the shore. Silence. We stand in it together. The echo slowly fades. The sound of distant waves returning from somewhere beyond the cave mouth. No one moves. A woman named Margaret, a retired nurse who spent 40 years caring for people at the end of their life, had tears streaming down her face. Later, walking back up the cliff path, she told me what happened for her. My mother died 3 years ago, she said. We had a complicated relationship. I took care of her at the end, which was the right thing to do. But there was so much unfinished business between us. Things we never said. Hurts that never got acknowledged. Margaret paused, looking out at the sea. In the cave, when the birds joined us, something released. I can't explain it logically, but I felt her, not as a ghost or a vision, nothing dramatic, just the presence of my mother. A sense that she was there and that whatever was unfinished between us could finally rest. Margaret smiled, still tearful. I've been carrying that weight for years, and in 10 minutes of drumming with birds, it lifted. This is what Samhain makes possible. The reconciliation that comes when you stop trying to figure it out and you simply allow yourself to be present in the mystery. If you're listening to this and feeling a call to Merlin's cave, if you recognize the weight of unfinished business or ungrieved loss, I would love for you to join me on pilgrimage. I'll be guiding the final Celtic shamanism journey this May. And if you want to come, the link is in the show notes, and I would love to have you there. When we speak about darkness as a place of transformation, about the shadow territory where the soul is refined, there's a voice from the contemplative tradition who mapped this terrain with extraordinary precision. That mystic is John of the Cross. John was a 16th century Spanish friar who endured imprisonment, torture, and isolation for his commitment to spiritual reform. It was during his months of imprisonment in a tiny cell in Toledo, a dark space barely large enough to stand in. It was during that time that he began composing the poetry and teaching that would become his masterwork. He called it the dark night of the soul. This phrase has been misused in popular culture to mean a difficult period, like a bad breakup or a career setback, a bout of depression, things like that. But John meant something more specific and more helpful. The dark night, in his understanding, is a kind of purification. It's what happens when God draws your soul into deeper intimacy by removing the lesser lights that it has been clinging to. John writes, "If a man wishes to be sure of the road he treads on, he must close his eyes and walk in the dark." This sounds terrifying to our modern ears because we want certainty and control. But John is describing something liberating. The dark night strips away false securities, the ego's projections, the spiritual experiences we've become attached to, our sense of progress, and what remains is naked trust. And in that naked trust, genuine union with God becomes possible. John writes, "The endurance of darkness is preparation for great light." The darkness is teaching you something. Think about what you've been avoiding. The part of yourself you've rejected because it didn't fit the image you were trying to maintain. The question you're afraid to ask because you might not like the answer. Our instinct is to fix things as quickly as possible, to process it, to resolve it, to extract a lesson and move on. We bring the same efficiency mindset to our inner world than we do to our email inboxes. But some things can't be fixed. Our instinct is to fix things as quickly as possible, to process them, resolve them, extract a lesson, and move on. We bring the same efficiency mindset to our inner lives that we bring to our email inboxes. But some things can't be fixed. They can only be metabolized. John would say that the discomfort you feel when you sit with unresolved shadow is the discomfort of purification. Your attachments to being right, to being understood, to having things make sense, your attachments are being loosened. And this is painful precisely because it's working. The contemplative teacher, Cynthia Bourgeault, describes this process as kenosis, the gradual emptying of self-will that makes room for divine will. All you have to do is consent to the process. You don't need to understand what's happening. You just have to stay with your experience and allow God to do its work on you. So here's a practice you can do at the Samhain threshold. All you need is 5 minutes and a willingness to be present. Find a space with low light. The point is to reduce stimulation so your attention can draw inward. So no screens, no bright lights, somewhere quiet in low light. And sit comfortably and notice where your body wants to tighten. Scan from your head down through your shoulders, chest, belly, legs. Where is the tension? When you find it, don't try to force it to release. Just soften one place gently, like you're breathing space into a clenched fist. And say to yourself, I can hold whatever comes up with self-compassion. This is the mindset you need to have at Samhain. Not fixing, not fleeing, just holding whatever comes up with compassion. As you sit here, doing this body scan, just allow whatever feelings you have to be present. There may be sadness, or fear, or grief, or something you can't quite name. Just let it be there and don't analyze it. Don't try to trace its source. Just let it exist in the space that you're holding. Sit there for as long as it feels good, and when you're ready to end your practice, do one simple action of self-care. Drink a glass of water, or eat something nourishing, or lay down for a few minutes. The point is to pay attention to your inner world and then return to your practical life with gentleness. And the reflection question afterward is, what am I avoiding that might actually be purifying me? What am I avoiding that might actually be purifying me? Maybe it's a loss you deferred grieving because there wasn't time, because others needed you, because falling apart felt like a luxury you couldn't afford. Or maybe it's a truth about yourself that you've sensed for a while, but you haven't wanted to confirm. Or maybe it's an old wound that still shapes your choices in ways you pretend not to notice. Shadow met with self-compassion becomes wisdom, and you need to give yourself space to notice your shadow. There have been seasons in my life when I wanted to move on quickly, spiritually and emotionally, because sitting with the fullness of what had happened felt unbearable. The grief was too big. The truth of my own role in the situation was uncomfortable. But when I finally slowed down, when I found the support that I needed and allowed myself to hold what was real with gentleness, something shifted in me. The fear softened, and the shadow that I thought would break me actually helped me grow. Samhain offers you the courage to stop running from your shadow. And when you stop running, you discover that you are stronger than you knew. Okay, so let's reflect on where we've been. The Samhain threshold is about sacred completion of a cycle. Today, we descended into Merlin's cave and discovered what happens when you stop avoiding the darkness and let it become a place of unexpected communion. Over these 7 episodes, we've moved through a full arc. Imbolc taught us to sense the first stirrings of what's forming beneath the surface. The spring equinox gave us the courage to choose and move. Beltane reclaimed desire and joy. The summer solstice invited full radiance while learning to receive support. Lammas taught us to actually take in the nourishment that's being offered. And the autumn equinox practiced the mature art of release. And now, Samhain has shown us that shadow, met with compassion, becomes wisdom. The wheel continues to turn, and one more threshold remains, and that is Yule, the winter solstice, the threshold of stillness and the return of light. If you've been trying to figure out what's next for you, pushing for answers before they're ready, or exhausting yourself with planning and strategizing, then the winter solstice threshold offers a different way. We're going to practice patient trust and the willingness to remain in the darkness just long enough for the new light to find you. We're going to one of my favorite places on the entire pilgrimage, and I cannot wait to share it with you. But before we close, I want to tell you about the journey that these episodes have been preparing you for. And that is the Celtic Shamanism pilgrimage in England. It runs from May 23rd to June 2nd, 2026. And this will be the absolute final time I lead this journey. We've talked about Stonehenge at sunrise and the Long Barrows chambers, and we've entered into Merlin's cave with drumming and the birds. But there is so much more on this journey. We're going to walk the ancient stone rows at Boscawen Oon in Cornwall, where the energy of the land is palpable beneath your feet. We'll visit St. Nectan's Glen, which is a sacred hidden waterfall in the Woodland Gorge. We'll trace the labyrinth carved into the rock at Rocky Valley. It's such a mysterious symbol, and no one fully understands its origins. We'll climb Glastonbury Tor at dawn and watch the mist rolling over the land. This isn't a tour. It's a transformational experience, because the land itself becomes your teacher, and what you discover there will rewrite something in how you connect with the sacred. If these podcast episodes have been stirring something in you, if you've recognized yourself at any of these 8 thresholds, and if England has been calling your name, join me on this journey. The registration link is in the show notes below, and this is the last time we will have this offering. As we close the episode today, let me return to the question that weaves itself through this whole series. What is the next threshold your life is asking you to cross? If it's Samhain, the threshold of shadow, of meeting what you've avoided, of allowing completion to finally arrive, know this. The darkness you're afraid of is not your enemy. It's the territory where the deepest transformation waits. My friend, may you have the courage to stop running from your shadow. May you find the support you need to face what's real. May you discover that shadow met with self-compassion becomes wisdom. The dark night is not the end. It is love doing its deeper work. Until next week, trust the mystic within you.